This is Jeffrey Smith, and this is the actual one, the actual interview now. We have a bunch of activists and scientists here in Russia, in Moscow, and I want to introduce you to Irina Ermakova in a second. I want to say, when I travel around the world, I do a number of things. I meet with the government officials, I give public talks, I meet with the media, and one of my favorite parts are meeting with the activists and scientists in the area where we get to swap stories. And so I've met Dr. Irina Ermakova in China, in Brussels. We gave talks at the European Parliament before. And I talk about your research all the time, Irina. So thank you so much for doing your research. Now, we're going to hear from Irina, and then we're going to hear from some others about what's happening in Russia and what's happened in the past that you definitely want to know about. I also want to recommend that you share this video, because this is information that you want to get out as much as possible. So please hit share and like to this Facebook post. Okay, so Irina, when you're part of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and you did a research study using GMO soy that you picked up in Holland, some Archer Daniels Midland soy flour, if I remember correctly, and you decided to feed it to genetically to female rats, starting before they got pregnant. Yeah. Okay, and so then you continued to feed either GMO soy or non-GMO soy or diets with no soy. Those are the three groups.
Absolutely.
And so what happened after you fed these groups these products and then they gave birth? What happened then?
We have got very awful results because red pups from the group, when we fed females by GM soy, they died. Most of them died.
So the rat pups, most of the infant rats died, more than 50%, within about 3 weeks?
Yes, during 2-3 weeks, yes.
All right. So
but most of them died during 1-2 days. 1
or 2 days. How did you feel when you saw all of the rats die from the moms that were fed the GMO soy compared to, what was it, about 10% death rate total for the non-GMO soy and a 6% death rate for the control group with no soy? How did you feel when you were just seeing all these dead rat pups?
It was shock for me, and I was so frightened because it was really a very stressed situation. And after that I began to speak about this and applied to many people to repeat my experiments or to do the same with another GM cultures, because it's really very important for people, for humanity, to know how these GMOs are dangerous or not.
I remember when you did this study, I interviewed you and I wrote an article saying that Dr. Ermakova asks everyone in the world to consider reproducing this study, because it was one study, it showed absolutely astounding results. It wasn't just the high death rate, there was also a lot of smaller baby rats, right, in the GM-fed group. Yeah. That's where you see this picture of a small rat and a larger rat, and they're the same age.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It was 19 days, and you can see the big red pup from control group and very small from the group of GMO. And
what happened after they grew up, they became mature, and then you tried to mate them to see what would happen in the next generation. What happened then?
All of them were infertile.
Wait, I want to make sure everyone heard that. All of them were infertile. So what I remember from reading the raw data, when you tried to mate the offsprings of the GM-fed group with each other, they did not have any babies. When you crossed them with the controls, yes, they had some babies, but not many. Absolutely. And then when you had the controls mating with the controls, then you had the normal, yes, babies.
Absolutely.
So this was so interesting. And what was your feeling or your response when you realized that your GMO-fed rat group was infertile?
You see, the GMO, they cause the infertility and of living organisms and of people. And what it means that destruction of the nature, that also what's happened with humanity, people will disappear, right, because they will stop to give the next generation.
You know, I don't envy your situation where you were the only person that actually realized this. No one had done a simple study like this, and you were realizing that GMOs might imply infertility for not only animals but for humans. Now, when you went public with this information, as we know what happens, and you probably didn't know this beforehand, I could have warned you, when scientists discover problems with GMOs, they are trashed. There's so much effort to try and stop them. So tell me, what was one of the harshest ways that you were treated when you made public your information?
But from the one side, there was an attack on me from some groups, and for me it was so strange because I told about very important things in the world, and they tried to stop all my experiments, and also they asked me not to continue my experiments and not to speak about this, and therefore I was forced to leave my institute, and it was very bitter for me.
Yeah, so you had to leave your institute, but before that happened, you found someone stole some samples out of your laboratory to threaten you. They burnt some papers on your desk. Yeah. I don't want to say this, I say one of my favorite stories, this is a horrible story, but one of my favorite stories, because I like the stories that just show how bad those guys are. There's a pro-GMO organization called Nature Biotechnology. I call them an organization. They're actually supposedly a peer-reviewed scientific journal. And they contacted you, and what did they say to you? This was so interesting.
You mean what?
Did the editor of Nature Biotechnology, they said they wanted you to do a summary.
Summary? You mean this paper?
Yes.
Nature Biotechnology?
Yes.
This you mean?
Yes.
Firstly, they sent me some questions and asked me to answer. And I asked them to publish the whole paper. And in this paper I will describe everything I did. But they refused. They answered that my task only answer their questions, and that's all.
So this was a setup. So here's what happened. Some pro-GMO scientists, including Val Giddens, who worked for the Biotech Industry Organization, used to work for the FDA, which gives you an idea of his aptitude and intelligence and pro-GMO bias. They decided to do what's called a hatchet job. Now, they got 4 scientists, none of whom had experience evaluating animal feeding studies and toxicological evaluations. And they approached Nature Biotechnology, which is pro-GMO, and they convinced them to have Irina do a summary. Not to submit the data, not to submit the article, but to summarize, which is extremely unusual. So they said, oh, we're going to give you a chance to summarize your situation, which should have raised some eyebrows at the time. So you gave them the answers to the questions, and they sent you what they called a galley, which was supposed to be the actual report, right? And they lied to you. They said, this is what we're going to publish. But they didn't publish that. Instead, they broke it apart into paragraphs and had these 4 pro-GMO hacks analyze and criticize every paragraph. And I went through their criticisms, and there was about 50 of them. And I would say 90% of their criticisms, nearly all of them, were criticizing your summary because it was a summary.
Yes, not the whole paper, because of course I didn't describe in details all of my experiments, but in these points they criticized.
Yeah, and they said, why didn't you present your data? And she said, I did want to present my data, but they wouldn't take it. So it was a criticism by design, just like they do the research. They design their research to force certain results, they set you up, and eventually the editor had to apologize, I think. Is that right? Because it became public on this absolute farce.
Very fast, yes. And but they allowed me to answer them and also publish my answers to these 4 pro-GMO scientists who never performed any experiments testing GMO on animals.
Right.
It was very strange. So But they again began to answer me, and after that I decided to stop because it was so, how to say, strange, and it was as a joke because that was not serious.
Yeah, so I run into these guys all the time, and they just, their arguments are so unscientific. Now, I'm not a scientist, but I talk to scientists around the world, and those scientists pay no attention to these guys who are these pro-GMO guys, but they have a lot of power. They do a lot of damage, and they're trying to do damage now in Russia, because Russia has a no planting of GMO law. And so right now, and we're going to interview Olga right now, who's on this side. So thank you, first of all, Irina. Thank you so much. Say hello to everyone, and please share this information for this outrageous story. And you're a hero for doing your work. And you didn't know it was going to be so hard. And thank you for continuing with this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Okay.
So now Olga's going to say how the biotech industry and the so-called scientists are trying to stop the efforts here in Russia. Tell us, what are they doing to try and counter the law by Putin and others that restricts planting of GMOs? What's their latest facade?
Well, in Russia last year, the federal law stopping introducing GMOs in seeds into environment has been adopted, and it was a great victory. And we hope that since last year now the situation with all this black market of GM seeds in Russia will be improved. But unfortunately, biotech companies are going to lobby a new, so to say, a new movement inside Russian scientific community, because to prove safety of GMO, using GMOs in seeds and products, they need this support of science and scientific community. And that's why we learned just from recent publications on the internet that a group of scientists in Russian Academy of Science from so-called Commission on False Science. Or
Commission on Fake
Science, they call themselves, are going to issue a memorandum saying that GMOs are unrisky, are undangerous. It is very...
But aren't they going to also say that in their report on fake science, that all the research studies done showing that GMOs are safe are fake science?
No. I think vice versa.
I mean, that are unsafe.
Yes.
But all the research showing that GMOs are unsafe,
yes,
are fake science. I'm sorry, I was just speaking the truth accidentally.
Yes, I think that they're going to will try to prove that those scientists like Irina, who tried to be objective, to make objective research and to show people what risks are connected with GMO using, are fake, are false. And thus they will open the door to all biotech industry into Russia. That's why it's so dangerous, and we hope, but still we have good honest scientists in Russia who issued and directed an open letter, so we called it, an appeal to the president of Russian Academy of Science, which is just
right across the
right
we'll show
across
the picture
river.
of it before we stop.
Yes, and they tried to persuade the president that such activity is unethical, yes, and that scientific community of Russia has to take into account all previous researches, all risks which are already revealed in world, all around the world, because in many countries we have some evidences which show that there are a lot of challenges, a lot of risks connected with GMOs. And by the way, if this commission will go on, it will show that they do not acknowledge the international principle, precautionary principle, which has been signed by many countries, including Russia, all over the world in Rio. in
Yes.
1992,
Yes.
which says that initiator of any new technology has to prove to public, to states, unsafety of this technology, not vice versa. Not public has to ask money and try to research itself, but initiator, the person or business who are going to extract a lot of profit then.
So what we have here is there's this concept of fake news, and then there's a concept of fake science. And so they're attacking now the science, trying to create the high ground. Now, there's a theory in this kind of public relations. There was a consultant who actually put out a whole book and a website advising the biotech industry how to fight their fight. And they said anything that you are attacked on, health problems, environmental problems, ethics, etc., claim the opposite. So if people say that your crops are going to hurt people's health, then you say your crops are safer and the other foods are not as safe. If you think that it's going to be bad for the environment, which of course it is, then you say our crops are going to be better for the environment. If you think your science is going to be challenged as fake science, you challenge the other side as fake science. So they've actually been following this game plan for years, and we watch it all over the place. So in case you're interested, and I don't have time for it now, there's 41 pages in my book, Genetic Roulette, The Documented Health Risks of Genetically Engineered Foods, Part 3, all about how industry rigs its research to avoid finding problems, how they use tobacco science, corporate science, and lie about the findings or design their studies to keep those findings secret. So thank you, Olga.
Thank you very much.
And so now we're going to hear from Alexander, who's on my right, thank you, who actually had the distinct privilege of being sued by Monsanto. Now, anytime someone is sued by Monsanto or their representatives, you get my attention. So Alexander's involved with greenhouses and seeds and all that. And so you tell me that in 2008, well, we know that earlier Monsanto bought Seminis, the largest fruit and vegetable seed producer, but they also bought another company in 2008.
Yes, it's correct. It's De Ruyter Seeds, one of the biggest Dutch companies, seed producers for greenhouses. And we, at that time, we represent De Ruyter. And when they changed the owner, I start to ask new owners if they will prove that seeds delivered to Russia are GM-free or not. And 1 year later, I received mail that they will not prove because they say it's too costly for them. The, let's say, analysis costs roughly 120 euro, but they sell more than 1 million euro a year. So it's not, let's say, that big money.
So let me make sure that this is clear here. That you're buying seeds from Monsanto under the brand name De Ruyter, and you're asking for proof that their seeds are non-GMO, and they don't answer you for an entire year.
Yeah.
And then after that they say, we can't, it's too much money. So you have to buy the seeds and take our word for it. And so you wrote an article where you said, you raised the question, are these genetically engineered from De Ruyter and are they safe? And it's an American company. And then what happened?
Well, they take me to the court and told that, blaming that I, let's say, said that Monsanto is American company. That is not true, first of all. Secondly, that they told, I asked actually two questions. First question was, do you help United States selling, when you buy seeds from genetically engineering company Monsanto?
Do you help?
It was a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you help? Are you helping to sell Monsanto seeds,
Yeah.
an American company?
Yeah. And second question was why Monsanto not put logo on sachets of seeds and cover with brand of De Ruyter.
So in other words, they had taken over De Ruyter's, but they kept hidden the fact that they owned it. And so Alexander called their bluff and said, how come they're not putting their own logo on? And got sued by the Russian distributor. And you won your court case.
Yes, yes, because I was right.
Yeah.
It is true.
And not only that, but they finally went to the website and they changed it so because the De Ruyter company no longer existed as a Dutch company, they were actually an American company, Monsanto. And so thank you so much for standing up to the beast.
Yes.
I appreciate it. So now we're going to talk about what can be done to ensure non-GMO status. Because, you know, when the federal government passes something, you never know how long it's going to last. One time I was, and this is Victoria, by the way, she's going to talk to us. I met Victoria in Bonn, Germany in 2006. She's been working on GMOs as long as I have, 21 years. Congratulations for being one of the survivors like me. So I remember at one time I was flown to Poland by the Polish government and gave a press conference with the Minister of Environment praising their strong anti-GMO position because they were not just against GMO food seeds, they were also against GMO animal feed. But a week later, a new government was voted in and it was more pro-GMO. So I am so aware of the instability of politics. So right now you have I'll call it Putin's anti-GMO law, and we don't know where that's going to go. Putin and the US, they may have some different relationships going. We don't know what kind of pressure is going to happen. So what do you think needs to happen now in order to create a more stable non-GMO situation?
You know that Monsanto is promoting its hybrids everywhere here in Russia. So tomatoes, cucumbers, etc. And farmers here, they are unaware of GMO issue as a community. Maybe some of them are.
So Monsanto's all over the place, not
All
selling
over
the
the
GMOs,
place.
but selling the
Selling
non-GMOs, right? They're hybrids, okay.
Mm-hmm. And they organize workshops in the distant regions of Russia.
So all over there's Monsanto workshops, and they're gaining the trust of farmers as they sell their tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a preparation for possible...
For the next step, possible next step, the growing of GMOs. And I'm afraid that Monsanto is waiting for Putin to lift the ban that we have now.
So if Putin lifts the ban, they're in place and immediately have the pipeline.
And yeah, because they have all the infrastructure here, all the facilities, so no problem to start. So, and maybe you've heard of the so-called bilateral agreement that we signed between US and Russia.
I'm not aware of the bilateral agreement.
Okay, in 2006 it was.
All right.
Well, during the negotiations on joining WTO by Russia. It was negotiations between Russian side and American side.
I do know that the bilateral agreement, the relationships between the United States and other countries are so horrible when it comes to GMOs. They'll say, okay, we'll do this for you, this for you, this for you, but you have to then accept GMOs, etc., etc. There was one time someone from the US Senate wanted to put into a bilateral agreement with Africa that they'll only give aid to countries that accepted GMOs. This is how we use bilateral agreements as the world's bully for GMOs. Okay, go ahead. What happened?
So in this agreement, there was a letter dedicated to biotechnology, and in this letter it was said that we have to approve all GMOs that US will promote here.
So now I want you to understand this. By saying that Russia will automatically approve it, it assumes that those seeds and GMOs were approved in the United States. In reality, the FDA doesn't approve a single GMO. They allow the companies themselves to determine if the foods are safe, and there's a facade, a fake voluntary consultation process, where at the end of the day they get a letter saying Monsanto believes its foods are safe, therefore there's no further questions. And so they wanted you guys to accept this facade, to do the same.
Exactly.
Basically, Monsanto can decide whether something was safe for Russians.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is the reason why we are waiting for those dark times to come. That will come here very soon, I think.
So talk to me about the local GMO-free egg.
And yeah.
Yes.
And one of the ways to resist the situation or to create a stable, anti-GMO stability here in Slovenia. We need to create GMO-free zones from grassroots level. So to organize farmers here to be stable communities of natural growers.
And you know, this was brought up to me also in Latvia, where 104 out of 109 counties are non-GMO. And I was talking to some top government officials, can't say who they are because I don't need them to get letters from Monsanto to try and discredit me. But they said, talking to them, and there was still concern because you don't know if the non-GMO ban is going to stay, you know, nationwide as well. Anytime you have a federal situation, there's a lot of lobbying that goes on, there's a lot of pressure that goes on, there's bilateral agreements, there's WTO, and there's still the transatlantic treaty possibility. I know that the Pacific Treaty was deep-sixed by Trump, but there's still a European treaty, and if that goes through, then companies like Monsanto could sue Russia if they're part of the treaty, or if they do ever sign. I don't know, were they part of that?
Not yet.
All right, but if something goes like that, then you can actually be sued by a company for lost profits because your laws reduce their sales. So it's a great way for the corporations to take control over governmental laws. So your idea then is to create GM-free zones, and the good news is that GM-free zones have been implemented all over Europe. They've been implemented in Australia, in New Zealand, in the United States. Did you know we have GM-free?
Yeah.
Isn't that great? Hooray! We got Mendocino County as the first. We got others. It's fantastic. So we do have GMO-free zones where there is local binding laws that are actually not just resolutions, but real. And so if there's tipsy-turvy at the top, there's still stability at the bottom. And it's an interesting thing because politically that makes sense. But there's also a non-political solution, which we're focusing on at the Institute, and that is to get the consumers to be so anti-GMO that even if all of the regulations allow GMOs to be introduced and grown,
they will refuse.
They'll refuse it because there's no commercial market for it. And so we're starting that nationwide. Well, you've been doing that a long time in Russia, educating people. But last night they just played Genetic Roulette on television, my film, with an hour-long interview with me and others, and so we're starting to get the direct education. Thank you so much for your efforts.
Thank you for your work as well.
Okay, 21 years together, all right, excellent.
Yeah.
And now we have another great activist, Nadia, and Nadia, I met Nadia in China. We had this fantastic coalition of 30 of the most important activists and scientists on the non-GMO side. Seralini was there, others were there. It was great, and we all gave presentations for over 2 days in China. And you're working on trying to get a major research piece done that could blow the roof off of everything. But before we talk about that, we have in the United States what's called the DARK Act, the Denying Americans the Right to Know, D-A-R-K. And it was being considered by the Senate, and it was going to eliminate the ability for states to require labeling. Vermont had already passed this labeling law. It was supposed to go in force on July 1st, 2016. And the biotech industry was freaking out because companies were already quietly labeling nationwide that their products contain GMOs, and they didn't want to reveal that. So what did you guys do when we were facing the DARK Act?
When United States citizens faced the DARK Act, we decided to spread our support from Russia. And we organized at the same time, exactly while you were at Washington. In Washington, we organized a specific rally, food safety rally in support of all Americans, people's right to know.
Right. So the Russians were trying to protest. Where was the protest?
The protest was in front of the United States Embassy in Moscow.
So you guys were trying to convince American embassy to support American democracy.
Exactly.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And I have bring some pictures that we would like to show.
Okay, there you go. I don't know how well it's going to be seen, but I'll assume you can see. It says GMO right to choose. Label GMOs now. These are Russians carrying American flags across the street from the American embassy. And here's the Texas hats on 3 Russian women saying food justice, rally. There we go. I want to give you a little closer look, and then we'll back up. And I don't know how it looks over the screen because it's way over there. Go ahead. So,
Here in Russia we have a mandatory labeling. We have right to choose.
you
the
have
food.
labeling. They have labeling here, by the way. They don't have labeling in the United States. Okay.
Yeah, it's a strange situation that you don't have the mother of democracy, have no
and
democracy.
the belly of the beast in the GMOs. The mother of democracy and the belly of the beast. It's an interesting concept. Okay.
So we hope that situation will change in the United States as well, and all this food system would be transparent, and every person can decide by themselves what kind of food to eat, to consume.
Beautiful. And to help that along, your organization, what's the English word?
The name of our organization is National Association for Genetic Safety.
National Association for Genetic Safety, where you were so instrumental in getting the law passed that GMOs should not be planted in this country. So congratulations for that.
Thank
That's
you.
fantastic.
It's our common victory.
And we celebrated you all over the world. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And you're wanting to help that with research now. $25 million research plans over 3 years to test all aspects of GMO corn versus non-GMO corn fed to animals with all the different bells and whistles tested. And you're trying to raise money for that now. And that's at factorgmo.com. Factor GMO is the name of the research that they're trying to raise money.
This side.
Okay, this side. World's largest international study on GMO and pesticide safety, Factor GMO. So these guys are really advanced. Okay, so thank you very much. So I'm going to say thank you. Before we go, I'm going to show you across the street to the Russian Academy of Sciences building. It actually looks very futuristic. And then I'm going to sign off. We're going to take this way. Whoops. We're going to show you. There's the Russian Academy of Sciences building. Okay, and here I am again. Where are we? There. Here we are again. All right, so thank you, everyone. It's been my pleasure broadcasting from an activist organization, NAGS, in Moscow, and we'll catch you more on this tour later on. Safe eating, everyone. Очень приятно познакомиться.